well with your soul? I wonder sometimes. We sit in our pews every day, and people are going home to be with the Lord, or even just going away, maybe not knowing the Lord. I can't help but to ask, is it well? Is it well with your soul? You might say it is, but is it really? Come sit in your seat every Sunday or Wednesday night or whatever night you have church or you do fellowship. I even have to ask myself that question. Man, is it really well with my soul? Amen. I don't know for you, but for me it's well with my soul. Amen. You know, as I go out and minister around the country and talk with many men and women, there's a question that I hear quite often. Everyone asks this question, even your pastor. Who am I? Why am I here? What is my identity? Who do I belong to? You know, these are real questions we seek answers to. Some of the false identities that our young people today are taking on as they appear to be going through what I call a false identity or an identity crisis. Each and every one of us want to belong. That's why we get involved in these marriage matters or these single groups. Our young kids are on Facebook and Twitter and Periscope and Instagram looking for a place to belong and to establish their identity through how they look, what they do, and where they go. The labels we put on ourselves, whether positive or negative, folks, influence how we behave and how we respond to others. We often label ourselves according to our national identity or our racial identity or even our work identity. But there's one identity we hear a lot about today, and that's sexual identity, or can I say the new term, gender identity. You are so much more than what you do with that area of your life. You're someone's son and you're someone's daughter. You're male, you're a female. And I hope you have gifts and you have talents. Many of you sit out there today and I can ask you this second question of how many of you know someone that's living a homosexual life? I said this to the pastors this morning. Homosexuality is the elephant in the room that you and I can no longer ignore. Because we're hearing about it everywhere. It's in our schools. It's on TV. It's at the movie theaters. It's at our colleges. It's in our homes. And now we're talking about it in our churches where we should have been talking about it a long time ago. And what's heartbreaking is many young adults are coming out of Christian homes and going to Christian schools in our churches, not only confused about their sexuality, but they're clueless about who God is and who He has called them to be. We have a spiritual conflict that is waging war all around us, folks. We are in a spiritual battle between forces, good and evil, and light and dark. It's sort of like what you see in the movies Lord of the Rings. But go ahead and take off your 3D glasses because this is no longer a movie. What you're seeing out there and what you're seeing on TV, that's not a movie. No. This is real. This is real life. We are living in a day and a time that what we used to watch or what we used to think about has now become a reality. Right. And this is affecting our culture and every generation represented here. Because the enemy knows whose you are. And if he knows whose you are, he knows you're destined for greatness.
Amen.
And if you're destined for greatness, you pose a threat to his game plan. Right. And I'm all about doing that. Because when I wake up in the morning, I want him to say, I thought I killed her yesterday. The devil to ever think that I'm going away, because I'm always going to pose a threat to his game plan. The unfortunate thing is that we have made this war about people. This war is not about people. We have Christians that dislike unsaved and unsaved that dislike Christians. But you know what bothers me more than anything? is us. We have Christians hating Christians. Now trust me, I know firsthand what it's like to get threats and offensive letters. But I know that hate is the driving force behind it. So what do? We fight back. But you don't have to fight back with your fists or with your mouth. You fight back in the spiritual realm where the supernatural is going to bring birth to the natural.
Yes. Amen.
Come on, I'm preaching better. You say amen.
Amen.
My message, which a lot of the gay community want to believe, is never about hate. How can you hate somebody that you're trying to help?
That's right.
My message is always going to be about compassion without compromise. See, I believe we're at the end of the end times. Our kids and adults' hearts are growing cold towards the gospel. Yep. Think about it. People are out there partying. They're having a great time. A lot of them weren't even thinking about God and the gospel.
That's right. Yeah.
They don't even care anymore. God, they have thrown out the window. People's hearts are waxing cold. Not only do we have boy meets girl, but now we have boy meets boy and girl meets girl. And we have people transitioning from male to female, from female to male. The unfortunate thing today is we see so many of our young people and adults alike taking on a sexual identity and labeling themselves as gay or lesbian or transgender. As I said this morning, there's a 52-year-old man out there who's claimed to be a 6-year-old. He's abandoned his wife and his 7 kids with a little bow in his hair. I'm not sure if they have that picture up there or not, but it should be up there. Satan. Anybody ever hear that song, Nay Nay? Watch me whip, watch me Nay Nay. You ever hear that song? Well, Satan must be doing the Nay Nay. Because he must be up there laughing at all the people he has convinced to reject God's plan for sexuality. And he wants you to think that freedom is found in rejecting nature. Well, I don't think God is up there doing the Nay Nay. I don't think God is up there laughing because he sees too many of his people in bondage to their sexual desires. And God is waiting on you and I to turn to him and discover our true identity. I'm going to tell you folks, we can no longer sit on the sidelines and watch. We're going to have to get involved if we want to see people's lives changed. You want to see people come out of homosexuality? You want to see people set free? Get involved. We were talking about that in the car. Oh man, same-sex marriage has passed 50 states. Nobody's getting involved.
Yep.
People are talking about it, but nobody wants to do anything. You can't change a world that you're not in. But at the same time, we cannot live by the world's view regarding homosexuality. Because it's always going to be contrary, folks, to God's word. Always. The media doesn't dictate on what we believe or what we don't believe. They don't get to tell us that homosexuality is the new normal or the new black or a civil rights issue. Because the color of my skin, the color of your skin is an immutable, unchangeable characteristic. We can't change that. I can't change from black to white. You can't change from white to black. But I did, however, have an encounter with Jesus, and my life was transformed, and so was yours.
Amen.
We are trying to fit homosexuality into a culture it was never meant to fit into. Never. Not by God's standards. As a child, I had love needs that were unmet, of course. Many of us have. I believed in false identities that people have placed on me. You see, I was raised in a family of 7 kids, 4 different fathers. My oldest brother had a dad, the same 2 under me had the same dad. I had a different father, and the 3 under me had a different father, and that was the man that raised me. That was the man that abused my mother, as I told many of them this morning. He knocked my mom down steps and gave her black eyes. And as he abused my mother abused us, and I became the abuser. I went to school and I started beating up everybody, Pastor, all the boys, until when I wrote my book, I had a better understanding of why I was beating up all these boys. I was really trying to get to my dad. I was trying to get to that man that was abusing my mother. But at the same time, we went to church, just like you went to church. My sister and I used to get in fights all the time because our clothes were being stolen by each other. At least we thought. I thought she was stealing my clothes, and she thought I was stealing her clothes. Until there was a knock at the door one day, and we found out that my next to the oldest brother, Robert, was Robert during the day, and he was Barbara at night. My brother was living a homosexual life, and we didn't even know it. That's the culprit. He was stealing our clothes. How were we supposed to know? My mother didn't even know. 2 kids wind up living a homosexual life. How does that happen? But I couldn't worry about my brother's life because I was too busy getting kicked out of school. I was getting in trouble all the time. Everybody thought I was a bad kid. I was not a bad kid. Bad things were happening to me. All the time. I was always called out of my name. The B word or a C word. And people wonder why in our homes that our kids are doing things that you don't want them to do. Because things are happening to them. I tell parents, you got to be careful what you say to your kids. Amen. It's like a post-it note. It sticks with them. You don't think it affects them, but it might not affect them now, but it might affect them later in life. As I was continually getting kicked out of school, they didn't want me in school. They didn't want me anywhere around. Actually, they really wanted to send me to a Catholic school. But they didn't want me either. But I was a great basketball player, so they decided to keep me around. My mother would come to school all the time. And on the days that she didn't have to come to school, I was so happy when my aunt decided to come because I would be sitting at school next to the principal and my mom would backhand me and knock me out of my chair. Or I'd be sitting on the steps with my friends and she would smack us and embarrass us. What kind of mother would abuse her kid and beat them with extension cord and broom handles butt naked and then send them off to school? Or tell them, you better not cry. For many years, it was hard for me to cry because I learned how to suppress it. Because that's what I was taught first. But at school, they thought I was a bad child. One day, I was kicked out of one of my classes. My English teacher said something to me that I've never heard before because nothing was ever nice said to me. She said, Boynes, you have so much potential. Me? Have potential? Nobody has ever said anything nice to me that I have potential. And as my English teacher started spending a lot of time with me, all the teachers were saying, why are you spending time with her? She's getting D's and F's. There are students that are getting A's and B's who are going to go off and do great things. She'll be dead by the time she's 21. She'll be on drugs. She's worthless. But these students are going to go on and do something with their lives. Well, let me tell you something. Them students are still back in Philadelphia on drugs.
That's right.
Half of them never went to college. Half of them are dead. God will take the foolish things of the world to confound the wise.
Amen. Yeah.
That was not going to be my future. But I believe God put this woman in my life for a reason. It was up to me to either take the help that was given to me or reject it. But I had no other choice because nobody else wanted to be around me. The girls didn't want to hang out with me and the boys didn't want to hang out with me because I beat them up all the time. I never forget one day I went home. And this guy asked me out. And I said, you didn't ask me out when I was a kid. He said, that's because you used to beat us up all the time.
Yeah.
It was amazing that one woman could have such an impact on my life when nobody else thought. How God can take the foolish things of the world to confound the wise. I used to spend a lot of time with this 8th grade English teacher. I used to tell her everything because she was the only one I could trust. I couldn't even trust my mother. My mother didn't even come to my basketball games, but she did. Her and her husband did.
Man.
My mom was illiterate. Still is. She couldn't read. She couldn't teach me anything, but she did teach me how to clean. She taught me how to beat up people. Because that's what happened to us on a regular basis. We got beatings. We had to clean. We had to cook. We stayed in the house. We were abused. But my 8th grade English teacher saw something else. She saw and gave me hope. And in spite of all the things, even though I used to tell my 8th grade English teacher everything, the man that my mother married was my next to the oldest sister's father, and we used to go hang out with her all the time down at his house on a regular basis. And on one particular day, we went there, and he decided to send them to the store and kept me behind. My youngest sister and my oldest sister, and he started molesting me. He started touching me and doing things to me that no father should do to a child. And I suppressed that for many years. Until I was 21, it happened at the age of 13. And when I told my mother, she didn't believe me. A mother wouldn't believe their child was molested by a man that she married. And then I go on to be molested by an altar boy. Boy, how does that make you feel? Then you wonder why women are living a homosexual life. Do you know 85% of women that are living a homosexual life have been molested? 85%, folks. These are not bad people. Bad things happen to them. The impact this had on my life would not affect me until I was in my 30s. Because I made a decision after everybody said I was going to be a lesbian anyway, I was going to prove them wrong. I didn't want to be a lesbian. I didn't wake up one day and say, hey, by the way, y'all, I'm going to be a lesbian. Woo! Nobody wakes up one day and say, I want to be gay. Or I'm going to be a lesbian. Or I'm going to be a drug addict. Or I'm going to have an eating disorder. Oh, by the way, I'm going to watch pornography for the rest of my life. But I made a decision. What happened to my mother would never happen to me. That I would never marry an African-American man because I associated African-American men with abuse and rape. Of course, my heart has changed since then. But I say to you fellows right here today, the impact that you can have on your families is so important.
Amen.
We need you. Men, young men, we need you to grow up to be a great godly man. Amen. To go on and get married and raise your kids. We need you. Amen. You are that next generation that is we are going to give the mantle to.
That's right.
Yes, young man, it's you. Fathers and pastors, you are the head of our homes. We need you. I wish I was able to say that to my father who has already died. But I don't have that opportunity. But I can say it to you. My heart has changed since then because I made a decision that I hated men and I wanted nothing to do with them after what happened to me. Well, my 8th grade English teacher who was in my life decided that she was going to move to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I went off to college. 3 years later, I followed her and went on to Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I went to Concordia College. And at that time, I met a woman who came into my life, which I wish I could find her today. to a church by the name of Jesus People Church, and I gave my heart to the Lord in 1980. And boy, did I go home and get my whole family saved. I scared them half to death. Boy, I tell you, these new Christians make great evangelists. But during the time when I was home, my next oldest brother told me a secret that I couldn't tell anybody. I wish the knowledge that I had today that I had back then. But because he was gay and he was sleeping with all these men, he told me he had the virus. I didn't understand that back then. I was too involved in my own life. But I went on back to Minneapolis, Minnesota. He stayed on the East Coast in Philadelphia. And I went on with my life. And I met this wonderful Caucasian guy who asked me to marry him. My pastor spent so much time with us, and we were preparing for marriage, and I was so excited in the 1980s. Somebody wanted to marry me. They told me I would amount to nothing. I was excited about this. I really loved this guy. In 1985, I was supposed to walk down the aisle. But I met this woman at work who I started spending a lot of time with because the guy that I was supposed to marry was spending more time with his bicycle and with the drums. I already had abandonment issues, but the bike and the drums were more important than me. Man, I wonder how many of us spend more time with our things than our families or our wives or our husband. Not this pastor, but I hear a lot of young kids who are living homosexual life who have parents as pastors said they spend more time at church than they did with us. They gave more time to the people at church than they gave to us. Or their jobs was much more important because they thought if they gave us things, we could go off to college and we had new cars, but we didn't want that. We wanted something to love us. But this guy found out later, when I was long gone, when I started spending time with this woman at work, and one day I spent too much time with this woman at work. And one night I stayed late at her home and I wound up sleeping with her that night. A woman that I never thought I would get involved with, that would send me down a dark path. 3 months before I was supposed to walk down the aisle with that young man, I called off my wedding. I went to my pastor and told him. He told me, tell my fiance, get some help and call off your wedding. I told my fiance and I called off my wedding and I walked away from the Lord for 14 years. I say to a lot of you, as well as the young kids, you show me your friends and I'll tell you your future. Sin is always going to be crouching at our door. Always. And we are going to have to master that thing. We're always going to be tempted to do certain things, but it doesn't give us permission to give into it. The life you have is God's gift to you, and what you do with that life is your gift back to God. Well, I was on drugs and I was having a good time. I was living a homosexual life. I had women, I had drugs, I had a beautiful home. I didn't want God. But the Bible does say sin is fun for a season, isn't it? And I enjoyed every minute of that season, but after a while, I had a void. Right. I was empty again. And I started filling it with drugs and alcohol, and nothing would fill that void. But I promise you, if you have a young one, or you have a family member or a friend that has walked away from God, I promise you, his word never comes back void.
That's right.
That God is working on that person out there because he drove me nuts.
Amen.
He would not leave me alone. And I used to shake my hand at God and says, if you want me, catch me. Literally. You want me, come get me. Because I am not going to serve you. But God had a different plan. I started my own cleaning business, folks. And I had 7 people working for me. And during that time, I was living with this woman in Maple Grove, and it was Assemblies of God Church that I used to go past on a regular basis. And I used to tell my girlfriend, I'm going to go to this church one day, and she'd say, go. I thought, I'm not going to that church. Are you kidding me? Dress dressed like a guy, looking like a man. I'm never going to go to that church. Until one day I was working for my own company. And Lifetime Fitness was one of my clients. And 3 o'clock in the morning, I decide to walk to the grocery store. And as I was going in, this woman was coming out. Her name is Tammy Brown. And I stopped in front of this woman. I go, really, 3 o'clock in the morning? What are you doing out here? She said, oh, I just took my son to school. I said, but don't you know you can get raped and somebody can steal your groceries and your purse? She goes, nah, just drop my son off at school. My family and I are getting ready to go on vacation, my husband and I. And, I got 4 boys, so we need to get some groceries for them. Boys like to eat a lot. And as we were having this conversation, it came up out of my belly, and I told this woman I was living a homosexual life. Why would I tell her that? Because I believe that was something God put in my spirit. And this woman invited me to church. She said, my husband and I are going away for 2 weeks, but we'll be back. Why don't you come to church with us? 5 years prior to that, God showed me a church I would go to called Maple Grove Assemblies of God. She pulled out a brochure. It was Maple Grove Assemblies of God. Amen. So 2 weeks later, I went to church, and I rededicated my heart to the Lord. Amen. And when I walked into that church, they didn't look at me and said, look, you look just like a man. You need to change. Pastor and I was talking, he was talking about how he gave his heart to the Lord, and he was just so on fire for God. He didn't think about what he looked like until somebody came and told him he needed to take these earrings out of his ear. That's the last thing you're thinking about when you're a new Christian, man. You're so on fire for God, you're not thinking about what you look like.
Amen.
That's right.
But everybody else is. Well, I just kept serving God, and this church, I think, is a prime example on how you should treat somebody or how you should look after and how you should pray for somebody that's coming out of homosexuality. They didn't have a clue what they were doing. Only thing they knew is that they needed to love that person and that God would do the rest. Amen. Well, there was a Bible study that was in the pastor's office for 10 women. There was one slot that was open. It was open for a very long time. I think they said about 3 weeks. And they invited me to come. Tammy said, why don't you go? And I said, sure. So I go into this Bible study, and I have this do-rag on my head, and I was dressed in sweats, because afterwards I was going to go to work. I mean, that's what I did for a living. I clean houses during the day and offices at night. And boy, when I walked into this church, oh my goodness. This Bible study, these women were dressed to the nines. They had their Louis Vuittons and they had their Gucci's, and I thought, oh God, you got to get me out of here. I don't fit into this group. They showed me something different, ladies. We did this little go around, and it got to me, and I told them my name was Janet and I'm living a homosexual life, but if you help me, I'll serve Jesus the rest of my life. And that's what they did. And that's where my journey began. What would have happened to me if they would have kicked me out of their church?
That's right.
Or if they would have shunned me? Or if they would have said, you can't be a part of our church. We don't know how to help you. They just loved me. They put their arms around me. They spent time with me. And as I spent time with them, I wanted what they had. Amen. I wanted to look like these women. I didn't know how I was going to get there. But I knew that I was in the right place. There was 2 leaders. One came to me weeks later and said they were praying for me and that their family thought that God spoke to their heart for me to come live with them. So at the age of 40, I sold my home. My girlfriend moved out, and I moved in with a Christian family. That was amazing.
That's right.
That's where I started to have a better understanding of how a wife should treat her husband and how a husband should treat their wife.
Amen.
I didn't have that kind of family when I grew up. I desired it. But now I have it. Now I can sit down and eat with a family and pray. I had somebody to take me shopping.